Good morning and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, this morning's video is going to be an unscripted and unchained RPG review response to playtest number 1 of Project Black Flag. If you're not familiar, Project Black Flag is a project spearheaded by Kobold Press, and originally, what Kobold Press said was that they were going to create a new game system and put it under the open role playing creative license, or ORC, which is being worked on by both Paizo and Kobold Press, and then a slew of other publishers that are out there. This was all in response to the OGL crisis, or whatever you want to call it, created by Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, um, when they tried to deauthorize the OGL 1.0A licensing agreement that had been in place for 22 years. And the response from many publishers, at that time was, well, we're going to separate from Wizards of the Coast and separate from the OGL 1.0A and create our own thing. All right. And so in the interim time, Wizards of the Coast kind of backtracked, at least temporarily, backtracked from their intentions. They never owned up to what their intentions truly were. So they've continued that lie. But what they did do was they took the 5.1 SRD, which is all of the nomenclature and systems and such of D&D 5e, and put it into Creative Commons. And therefore, it allows for people to, publishers, third-party publishers, to create content for 5e without fear of Wizards of the Coast stepping in and snatching away their license to do so, and so on and so forth. But originally, Kobold Press was saying that Project Black Flag was going to be its own game system. So I received the email sometime yesterday. I had signed up for the playtest, and so I received my playtest materials yesterday, and I started reading through it. Got through the entire document, on my second try, basically, and now I'm going to read off the portions of this that really stand out to me. And then later on, I will go and actually do a formal survey response to Kobold Press and what they present here. But you can see on my graphics here, I say this is very far short of a revolution, because that's how it was, that's how it was put on the email, was, welcome to the revolution. Well, they clearly have a different definition of revolution than than anybody else in the world. I mean, it's just a weird way of claiming that this is a revolution, when you take a look at their actual first couple of paragraphs. So let's get right to that. So this is the actual document. It's only 12 pages, so not very large. And let me just start going through this, because by the third paragraph, I was disappointed. All right. So let's go. How to use this packet. Thank you for your interest in playtesting the material contained within the playtest packet number 1 of the Core Fantasy system. Before you read through the packet, here are some helpful guidelines for playtesting this material. The Core Fantasy system is backward compatible with 5th edition and can be used in conjunction with any existing 5e material. As soon as you say that, then the core fantasy system is no longer something separate from 5e. 5e is the core fantasy system. All right, this is saying, and they go even further. This is saying that it's not really a core fantasy system. It is 5e. Since the document does not include class options, which will start rolling out in playtest packet number 2, creating a complete character from scratch using these rules found in this packet will require the use of the existing 5e base class. Alternatively, you can easily swap the options presented in this packet for an existing 5e options. Here are guidelines to keep in mind when doing so. So again, they keep on talking about you can disregard this and still use your 5e options if you choose. This is not a core system being created by Kobold Press. Player characters created using the core fantasy system are slightly more powerful than characters created using the 5th edition, but they are close enough that a 5e fighter and a core fantasy system fighter could still play together at the same table. This is intentional. So, one of the biggest problems with 5e is that the power creep in their characters is just off the rails. And so this makes them even more powerful. But then says, but if you wish to play an underpowered character from the 5e core system, then you're welcome to do so. Well, who would do that? All right. And why would they propose something that is one of the weak points of 5e in saying, well, we're going to make characters even more powerful? Let me continue. If you would like to make a 5e character of equivalent power to the core fantasy system character, simply give the 5e character a feat that the character would meet the prerequisites for at first level. So again, if you want to make your 5e character equal to one of these, you have to give them an additional feat at first level. The optional 5e feat rules can be found in the system reference document 5.1. All right, that's the SRD that they are using. Alternatively, you can give the character access to one of the talents described in this packet. In the terms of mechanical power, any of the 5th edition race and subrace combinations can be substituted for any of the core fantasy system lineage and heritage combinations. All right, so they're going with heritage and lineage as far as race and upbringing, basically. Introduction. Welcome to the Labyrinth, a fantastical universe of infinite worlds linked by twisting corridors of magic. Here you will find realms like Midgard, Hades, and the dreadful domains, and homebrew creations tied together by that's weird by a mysterious will of the maze. These countless worlds rarely resemble one another on the surface, but all have one unifying truth. Heroes shape them. So what is core fantasy role-playing? Core fantasy role-playing is an action-oriented role-playing game that pits a group of heroic adventurers against the myriad of dangers found in the fantasy worlds. Through collaborative storytelling, one player called the GM and a group of players called player characters will explore unique locations and embark upon adventurous quests within them. What is a role-playing game? A role-playing game is a form of collaborative storytelling that usually takes place at the table and requires paper dice, and dice to play. Most RPGs have one player who serves as a game master, and the other players at the table take on the role of the player characters. All right, so that's pretty standard. The role of the game master. The GM's role is to create the game's framework and keep the story moving. It is up to the GM to describe to the players what the world looks like, introduce obstacles for the PCs to overcome, and portray all characters who are not PCs. I have some suggestions about that, which I'll go into a little bit deeper, um, perhaps later on. The the GM is running the world, and the world is in constant motion, and the players, through their characters' actions, can impact upon that world both positively and negatively. Um, what this sounds like, so the story moving, keep the story moving. It's not the story; it's the world moving. So that's the one thing that I like to point out there. It's the world keeps on moving, or the story of the world keeps on moving. If they want to be a little bit more precise here, but the story uh, is is not is something that develops after the actions, and then you look back, and the story is created in a cooperative manner through the player interactions with the world. This makes it sound like there's a framework of a story being laid out in front of the players to be followed. So I think that they lose a little bit there. The role of the player character. A player's role is to portray their character as fully as possible. Imagine perceiving the world through the character's senses and react as they would to the situations presented by the GM. When interacting with the player characters portrayed by the GM or other PCs, and the player's voice serves as the characters. Um, I would also include in this that they are. It's not just imagining the world perceived through the character senses and reacting um, to what they would do in those situations. It's also drawing upon the character's knowledge of things, and if the character has no reasonable knowledge of that, like some situation, the player is not supposed to introduce that. Um, so it becomes much more important for the experience of the character in the world drive how the character is going to react to certain things. Again, it's just another nuance that I like to include, is that character knowledge is different than player knowledge. That separation needs to occur in order for you to properly role play your character in this imagined world setting. I'm not going to go into dice. Other tools you need, again, not going to dice. What is this book? This book contains the basic information you need to play core fantasy role playing. It provides instructions for creating an adventure portrayed by PCs, detailed dice roll systems, and to resolve challenges that contains other useful tools for playing in a fantasy world. Um, Let me go through and get to here. The elements of core fantasy. So, core fantasy in a nutshell is intended to be flexible, so it doesn't assume the standard setting. These rules are compatible with any published setting or unique worlds. Okay, so they're not, it's setting agnostic. Elements of core fantasy. Fantasy worlds have magic. The presence of magic is the core principle of the fantasy genre. Your setting might have a unique spin on how magic works, but it should be present somehow, and the PC should be able to access it. All right. I mean, sometimes you could have a low fantasy world. So is this not providing for the possibility of low fantasy? or very limited magic. So that's another issue I have, and that's a big issue with 5e, is that of the 27 some odd classes and subclasses of player characters, it's like 23 of them have access to magic, like actual spell casting magic. It kind of um, it kind of severely changes what Dungeons and Dragons was. All right, and it moves it to this, this more video game esque type of tabletop role playing. Heroic adventures. I'm going to have a big issue here. Fantasy stories are about heroes. The heroes in this case, the PCs, need to be the focus of the stories you create with. They need plenty of opportunities to defeat foes, make important decisions, and solve various other problems with their actions. Player characters may become heroes. They don't start out as heroes. Heroic is not having power. Heroic is passing that gut check and moving forward to a challenge and facing a challenge that you're very likely not to succeed at, but you still made that gut check and you still go for it. All right. That's what heroic is. You know, they seem to feel, and they're perpetuating that idea that player characters begin as heroes. They begin as very powerful in comparison to the average. And so this is why they go forth. You cannot have a heroic fantasy without significant challenge. All right. And that doesn't happen by giving them, just lumping upon them all kinds of abilities and everything right from the get go. Unique locations to explore. I'm going to skip over that. Power structures and systems. Whether through villainous empires or friendly guild factions, fantasy stories always include large organizations that can challenge or push the heroes to grow their abilities. These power structures often form the cornerstone of large campaigns, games with many subsequent sessions, and the most compelling adventures. All right, conflict at the heart of fantasy genre is about standing up against impossible odds and, despite everything, emerging victorious. This game keeps the principle at its core and is about staging challenges for the PCs to overcome through cunning, might, and magic. It's kind of contradictory to me here, because it says the principles at its core is about staging challenges for the players for the PCs to overcome through cunning, might, and magic. Yet at the heart, the fantasy genre is about standing up against impossible odds and, despite everything, emerging victorious. You're. It sounds like they're supporting the idea of manufacturing challenges that the players will most likely be able to overcome. All right. And then at the same time, calling that heroic. Uh, I have an issue with that characterization. Creating characters. So let's get into this. Before you choose any game option, spend time thinking about what kind of heroic character you want to play. And they're going to get into several things like choosing classes. I'm going to skip over this. Levels go up to level 20 for the purposes of this. Hit dice and hit points and hit dice. Proficiency bonuses. Determining ability scores. So here they have the various types of ways to determine your ability scores. So that you still have the same 6 ability scores that you're going to see, virtually anywhere. they talk about the 4d6 drop the lowest, which is typically the default at this point. There's a little bit more of a range in ability modifiers than I'm familiar with seeing. They do have a point buy system, but to be honest with you, starting off with 32 points and starting off with a base score of 8 is too much. So even though I guess the distribution could be, if you have 32 points, you can end up with a character with all 14s, or certainly all 13s. You could certainly end up with a character with all 13s. That would be 30 points. So all 13s and then one 14. Because so you would have +1 and potentially a +2 to everything. Then on top of that, you could add other point modifiers from character creation as well. Where if you have, if you have anything less than, and they go into this here, right? Assign those 6 numbers to the ability scores you choose. Add 2 to any one of the choices that is below 16. So you can raise one of those up to a 16 and add one score of your choice that is 17 or below. So then you can move one of those other scores up another point as well. So your character is going to end up with, on an average of like 14 or so across the board. It's that's a lot. Standard array, you could do standard array as well. Assign one of the following numbers to each of the scores. So 16, 15, 13, 12, 10, and 8. But then you can add 2 points to anything below a 16 or below, and 1 point to anything of a 17th or 17 or below. So you can make this 16 a 17, you can make this 15 a 17, and so you would have two 17s, a 13, a 12, a 10, and an 8. So again, it's heavily weighted to having high scores, and then on top of that, you still add the other points from possible heritages or whatnot. So choosing a background. So here, and I have a problem with this too, because again, this creates a real big power boost even at first level. When you have traits or feats from lineage, heritage, and then background, and then filling in other things, you end up with a first level player character that has, immense capabilities, even at first level, and it becomes that power curve that that 5e is oftentimes pointed to as it's one of its major problems. Gaining levels. So they have gaining levels based on based on tracking XP, which is fine. I like a unified XP as well. That's great. Milestones. Milestone leveling is one of the greatest detriments to tabletop role playing games that I have encountered. It literally is one of the factors of Wizards of the Coast's two major problems when it comes to 5e, and that is tracking milestones or milestone leveling shortens campaigns. All right, and this is why Wizards of the Coast came out and by their own admission, they said the average 5e campaign only lasts 6 sessions. All right, and that is because the player characters are advancing in levels so fast under this that it is that it becomes boring. It actually becomes boring to play those characters. And so they stop after a very short time frame. So that's number one. The number two problem that 5e is experiencing is that they're having trouble maintaining dungeon masters for it. And the reason why, or one of the reasons why, dungeon masters are losing interest in being dungeon masters is things like milestone leveling. It's like you have to constantly spend time sitting there while the players are leveling up their characters, and you have to like constantly change up what your plans were for the next session, or maybe even mid-session leveling or that kind of a thing. It's just a terrible, terrible system to include in your tabletop role-playing game. That's just my opinion, but I've never seen it work well, and it's even worse here because if you look at as a general rule, first level PC should hit a level up milestone after a single game session. Second level PC should hit level up after 2 game sessions. Third level should hit level up after 3 game sessions. Now, I don't know if this is supposed to be progressive the way that they're saying it. So you play 1 game session, you're level 1, you're now to level 2. I guess you have to play 2 game sessions to go from 2 to 3, and then 3 game sessions to go from 3 to 4. Or they mean that after 1 session, you're level 1. After a second session, you're level 2. After a third session, you're level 3. Which you could read that either way. I think it's the way I just described it. PC should hit level up milestones after 3 game sessions and approximately every 3 sessions thereafter. All right. So that would be after session 3. So session 6, they're level 4. It would be session 6, session 9, they're level 5, and so on and so forth. Right. I'm a dungeon master for a Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition campaign. We've run 78 sessions. All right, that is 78 3 to 3.5 hour sessions. The players, there were 8 player characters in my group, 8 players in my group, and their characters are now, after 78 sessions, in the level range of 8, and for some of the faster classes like Druid or Thief, like level 9. All right. Lagging behind is the Paladin, who just barely made 8 while everyone else is about to move to 9 or possibly even 10. 78 sessions to be level 8 or 9. They're talking about maybe 15 sessions to be hitting around that same mark. All right. 78 sessions allows for the players to not only fully understand their characters, but to fully understand the other player characters in the party. My players don't have to look at their character sheet for most normal things now. All right. Once in a while, they'll throw up a spell that they're casting. All right, so that we can see what's the details of it. And that's because at level 8 or 9 for magic users and druids and clerics and such, they have so many spells that they can access. But other than that, they don't have to look at their character sheets for anything, and they know what the other player characters have, even in their inventory. They kind of know what each other has, and that is because their characters have developed over a long period of time. They've developed their characters' personalities. They know how the other player characters are going to function in a variety of situations because they've seen it over and over again. They know what spells that most other most of the other players have already slotted and ready to go. They know what equipment they have accessible. I mean, they've literally said, "Oh, you're the one with the you have I know you have three healing potions on you." All right? And that is because they have been playing for so long together, and they know each other's characters almost as well as their own. And you don't develop that with such a fast paced campaign where characters are leveling up almost every session or even every 3 sessions. I mean, how long are they talking about for their sessions here? Are they talking about a 2 or 3 hour session? Are they talking about a 6 hour session? I think that it's important to know what session length they're talking about. So I have a real thing about tracking milestones for leveling up. I would never do it as a game master. And it really is a poor model, in my opinion, to utilize in your game. Lineage and heritage. So they go through here and they go through, age, size, speed. I at least like the fact that they are saying that your character's lineage or race is going to have some traits that are not swappable. All right. So halflings cannot be large. All right. And, you know, dwarves can't be small. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be some limitations based on the biological differences between the race. So that's fine. Um, I would add attribute bonuses and modifiers, I should say, attribute modifiers based on race as well, but I'm old school. All right, so I never had a problem with that. Elements of heritage, so they will have um, various things that are attached to their dwarf lineage traits. That's fine. They should have it. It's at least not swapping out traits like they do in 5e. Again, another real detriment to Wizards of the Coast's 5e is the fact that there is no meaningful choice in selecting a a race, a class, and then a background for your characters or non proficiency skills and such for your characters. Here at least they're adhering to the fact that dwarves have certain things that only dwarves can do, and elves and halflings as well will have various things that only they can do. Go into elements of background, so skill proficiencies and what you can add. Then you have talents on top of that. And again, I get back to that multi-layered. Um, you have 15 ways to circumvent a challenge that you're facing, kind of thing. Now I'm being a little bit hyperbolic there, but the point is that when you get a party of 4 or 5, and they all have all of these different actions and talents and such, it becomes um, it becomes very very difficult to create challenges that actually challenge the player party, even at lower level. The only way I would say for that is to throw tremendous challenge at them, and then you run the risk of total party wipes, and then you get labeled as a bad DM on top of that, or an adversarial DM on top of that. So the game systems make it very, very difficult. 5e in particular makes it very, very difficult to strike that balance between challenge and acceptable challenge and total party wipe. Just a list and list after trade skills and these other kinds of skills, martial talents, technical talents. I mean, I don't have a problem with some of these, but the point is that um, they should really be selected at they're part of class. And so let me look at magic talents here. Magic talents, most magic talents affect a character's spellcasting ability, but there are also a few features that strengthen the mind and defend against harmful spell effects. Um, Prerequisite to the ability to cast spells. And so this is just enhancing your current spell like ability or your defenses against spells. Again, I don't have a problem with that so much as, but it's, I mean, you should already have this as a spellcaster, and they need to severely limit the number of spellcasters they have in the game system. So overall, I'm going to switch views, go back to here. I mean, I know that was a real fast roll through of it, and my biggest disappointment really came from the very opening paragraphs where they kept on referring back to 5e, and this is not a revolution. This is a capitulation. I think as soon as Wizards of the Coast inserted the 5.1 SRD into Creative Commons, um, Cobalt Press folded their flag. And I said, okay, we can go right back to producing 5e product now, and we're not going to do the heavy lift of creating our own system and separating from the SRD 5.1, separating from the OGL 1.0A, and separating from a product that is dependent upon Wizards of the Coast 5e. All right, they actually did the exact opposite here. They capitulated, and they said, "All right, well, we're just going to create a homebrew, all right, and a homebrew supplement for 5e." All right, I don't see why anybody would move to this. They're just going to play their 5e, all right, unless they want to boost up the power of their characters, which are already too powerful to begin with, and run that. It's a disappointment. So I hope when I do my survey, I'm going to come out and say, don't call this a revolution. All right, this is not creating something new. All right, this is just supporting the old that you said that you wanted to separate from. If you're going to separate from it, separate from it. This I see as a failure of confidence to say, you know what, we're moving forward without Wizards of the Coast. All right, and we're going to create our own thing. And our product will be usable by 5e players, but they're the ones that will have to modify what we're producing to match their game. See, they're doing it the other way around here, it seems. They're saying, listen, you need that as your core system first to then come over and do this. All right. And so you still have to buy that in order to do this. And that's the problem that I have with this is that, I wanted to clear Wizards of the Coast products off my shelf completely and not have to rely on them anymore. All right. And even if you're using the SRD 5.1, and someone can remind me in the thing, but I'm pretty sure that you still have to put the acknowledgement that the Common Core is using Wizards of the Coast 5.1 SRD. And so you're still tying yourself to their product line. you're still tying yourself to Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, even by using that Creative Commons. I have far more respect for companies, publishers that are saying, "Listen, we're just going up with a straight up Creative Commons, not this new one, and or we're creating our own OGL, and we are going to remove all aspects of the 1.0A and all aspects of anything Wizards of the Coast SRD aligned with. Well, we'll use what's in Creative Commons, but not the Creative Commons 5.1 that states that you have to, and I don't even know how they get away with that, because once it's in Creative Commons, you don't have to give them um, any citation that it came from Wizards of the Coast. Um, so make the distance, do the heavy lift. All right. This right now is far short of a revolution. It's more of oh, thank God we can still make 5e content, and we'll just pretend that this is our own thing. It's a fail. Sorry to be so harsh about it, but I don't see that this is something that I would truly back. Now, maybe you'll change some things, based on the surveys, and I'm hoping that the surveys are pushing back on, this whole, use the 5e core book right now for playtest 2. I'm hoping that there's more and more separation from not just Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro or the SRD 5.1, but I'll move away from some of the detrimental things that 5e introduced to the hobby, as far as, as I mentioned numerous times there, milestone leveling, or, feats and traits, and all kinds of things, that just the overall power curve that you end up with in 5e, and as well as, the other, real big issues of short campaigns. Short campaigns is a killer for the hobby. It's a killer for the game system. It doesn't allow for players to really learn about the characters that they've created, and to really learn about the functions of the class that they're playing. And it doesn't allow for game masters to really develop a world that is a living, breathing world setting that is going to be impacted by the actions of players in a long campaign. All right. Many, many months, if not years long campaigns. All right. And even if you swap out different players or different characters and everything, the world setting is still moving forward. The campaign hasn't ended until you no longer have at least one player that was there from the very beginning, or if there are a group of players, even if your whole group of players have all new characters, they're still in that same campaign. They're still in that same, because a campaign, in my opinion, is a world setting with a history that has been, impacted by the actions and inactions of player characters being run in your world. So I'm going to leave it there. Overall, not very impressed with with this playtest number 1, and that is certainly going to be reflected in my survey response to this as well. So agree with me, disagree with me. I mean, it doesn't matter. Put your comments in the comments section. I welcome, anyone saying, "Hey, I think you got this wrong," and please point that out. And like and share this video. Subscribe if you hadn't subscribed yet. And I'm looking forward to the next release of this. I know they gave me a time schedule of when. I believe this is until the 27th of February. So they're giving about 2 weeks. I may be wrong with that. I'm going to have to double check it. But I believe this play test is going to be up for almost 2 weeks, but I could be wrong. Um, I hope it wasn't the 17th, but I'm going to do the response anyway. It might have been that quickly. Let me check my email so I can put out proper. Um, so I can put out a proper response here. I'm not going to be able to do that, am I? My iPad is so slow to go to. Let me check my Gmail and let's see. I will tell you when this is running. Okay, so let's see. This play test is going to run until February 27th. So I was correct. So this is going to run until February 27th. So you still have time to put in for it to get it, a copy of it, and you'll have time to read it and check over it. I am going to provide feedback probably today, and then go to their Discord and discuss this a little bit as well. So they have all of that embedded in the email, and I welcome you to go do the same and come back with your videos. I'll be watching a bunch of other videos that are talking about Project Black Flag and see where others are falling on this topic as well. So have a great rest of your afternoon and take care.